How's this going to work in rural Alabama? We've got free roaming chickens and horses walking near the streets a mile from where we're sitting. Within 18 months, I was running neck and neck with my partner in Phoenix, Arizona. There's a lot of vehicles that essentially have to be told that you're going to lift them before you physically put a jack underneath them. If I have a jack and this vehicle isn't put into lift mode, it may compensate some kind of way that could essentially knock itself off the jack. The next millionaires in our country are going to be those that work with their hands. It's not going to be these college students. It's going to be the guys that goes out there and learns how to turn a wrench.
In the future, can we ever just get a tire that's actually mass produced without air? Am I barking up the wrong tree?
For a industrial application such as the wheel.
Welcome to the Ride and Style Podcast, your turbocharged pit stop for automotive restyling. Buckle up with Jesse and Josh.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Ride and Style Podcast. Today, we're really excited to talk to Scott Blair, the Wheelman, love it, of 2U Mobile Solutions. Scott, thank you for taking time to chat with us today.
Hey, Jesse, appreciate that. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome.
Whenever I hear a cool title like that, Jesse, I got to ask you, Scott, is it more or less than 50% of your customers don't even know your last name? They just know you as Scott the Wheelman.
That would probably be pretty accurate.
I know. I sometimes when you get a bunch of different customers, right?
Yeah.
They just get to know you.
Yeah. Back in the day, when I was given that moniker, I worked with over 450 retail, mostly tire dealers that, many of them didn't really sell custom wheels unless somebody walked in the door and said they wanted to buy it. And so I basically had to do the sale for them over the phone because they didn't know much of anything about custom wheels. And of course, we're talking about back in the 90s. And, I laugh about it. When I started in the industry, we still sold 13-inch custom wheels. They were in stock on the shelf, ready for that Nissan Sentra and Honda Civic to get a custom wheel and still use their 155 80 13 tire. It's laughable. We don't even hardly have trailer tires that small anymore.
Right? I know, not unless you're working, not even on the UTVs. They're bigger than that on UTVs.
Yeah, pretty much. We're in a market over here where there's a lot of golf carts. Everybody's upgrading all that stuff. And of course, there's the manufacturers have got upgrades on those things up into plus 20 size. And, for golf carts and side-by-sides.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy. Well, we usually like to start on your history. Obviously, the Scott the Wheelman caught us off. We wanted to get the Wheelman behind, understand how that came about. But so, how did you start in the industry? Take us back.
Yeah, so I stumbled quite literally into the industry. I moved out of my local area that I had grown up in, and when my wife and I got married, we were determined we were going to live somewhere else and go somewhere different. So we threw a dart at a map, threw everything we owned in the back of a pickup truck, and we took off. And so I really didn't have any job to get there. I was quite literally just waiting tables. And so saw an ad for American Racing Custom Wheels, as they were looking for a salesman, assistant manager, or something. So I put on my suit. I had owned a 1978 Grand Prix. G-Body is known to the industry. I'm a huge fan of G-Bodies. I have several, and had customized it way back. We're talking like late 80s when I was doing stuff, custom paint, wheels, tires, stuff like that. And so I just walked in the door, had on a suit, and they pretty much hired me on the spot. It's like, I don't think they were used to something like that, and then I had a college education, and I guess that was like, don't let him get away. And so I walked into the industry really not even knowing or understanding how wholesale distribution even worked. And but within a few months of going through their training program, which was actually quite good at the time, I learned how technical that the things are with custom wheels. And that's really what drew me in. My background going through college was designing and doing things. Got a degree in operations and systems management. So I had an entrepreneurial kind of a road course. And so, but getting involved with the custom wheel business that then allowed me the opportunity to go out and then work with dealers and
Mhm.
individuals just trying to figure things out on their own. That's really what kickstarted it. And then a couple of years later, I managed to get a job working for a company called Hefner Tires and Products as a custom wheel specialist. And you may not know those names; those are some old family names, but you would know what they turned into, which was American Tire Distributors. And
Yep.
I was there. I was there as the, one of the few people that sold wheels for the original company before it became what it, what it would become. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where it started. And then in the late 90s, of course, we were doing all the, the tires, the wheel sizes were just going astronomical. We didn't even have tires to put on these wheels. And the manufacturers were creating, 20-inch wheels. We were putting them on Suburbans with tires that came on Ferraris because there was no, truck tire in a 20
No.
in 1996. So we were putting these ridiculous sized tires on there. It wouldn't even hold the weight. I mean, it's a wonder we didn't we didn't do more damage to the world than we did because we didn't know. And but during that process, I actually created and invented a tool called the wheel fit and got a patent on it in 1999. And matter of fact, you see the logo just above my head in the training center there. And so that was a really cool point of life, just taking something that was a sketch on a piece of paper and, spending 3.5 years, figuring it out and then finally getting a patent on that. So that's
I got a question for you. When you were when you were working for American Racing and even back in the early ATD days, what were shops like then? Who were you selling to? I mean, was it the big box chains back then, or was it all just a bunch of local shops? I'm just wondering how the landscape has changed over the last 20, 30 years.
It hasn't changed hardly at all, to be very honest. We were hugely supportive of independent mom and pop shops. Some of the largest ones may have had 3 or 4 stores. And in the market that I was at, which was down here in the Mobile, Alabama area. So, we served from a lot of rural communities. So there wasn't very many people that had multiple outfits. And then of course there was, 1 or 2 of the national accounts and stuff like that. Big 10 Tires at the time was a big account, what we would consider a national account. They were regional. They were actually based here in Mobile before they sold out to Pep Boys. And that's where most of Pep Boys got, acquired a lot of their locations in this particular area. We're going back 20 plus years now.
Yeah.
But they were one of our larger, what we would consider, a big account and stuff like that. But there wasn't that much of that. I mean, when I started out, the car dealerships didn't even work on their own tires. They pawned that off to the local tire dealers, and some of the local family accounts that we sold to, they had programs to go drive back and forth and go get the cars from the car dealerships. And
That's really changed over the years.
Now, yeah. So that's exactly where I was going. So you want to talk about a big change, in the early 2000s when corporate mandated that the car dealerships started, working on tires and doing their own stuff. Then we started delivering tires to car dealerships we'd never been to before. And so, that's been the biggest part of that is, when they started shifting into trying to do more stuff with tires to keep that customer coming back in for all the other automotive service, because they were losing that to the independents. And anybody that's been around for 20 plus years, have seen and knew about that. So, they've tried to really tie them back, to themselves. And then we've got people like, I don't know if you know Joe Interate, but, the Black Widow brand is a big, restyle package that's available through the dealership. It's fully warranted, and there's other packages as well that you're familiar with, different parts of the country. And so, that's been probably one of the largest shifts right there. But as far as fundamentally, mom and pops are still grinding away. They're probably not doing as well as they used to because, we were hurting for people that knew what to do, 20 years ago when I first started creating training products and delivering them through quite literally DVDs that we sold and would mail to people, and they would plug them in their DVD player and watch them on the TV. And so we were hurting for people 20 years ago. COVID pretty much just about wiped that out. So now we're at a point where, unfortunately, I see, an owner of a business, answering a telephone, trying to make a sale, hang up from the telephone, run to the tire changer to go try to put something on, and then tell somebody that was changing oil yesterday, who's now working on the alignment rack, which bolt to turn to put it into green so that we can get it off the rack and get to the next one. And so I've made it kind of my, what I would like for my legacy to be. And of course, you see the background of the training center there. And we're in the process of moving that facility from where it was at to, we're looking for a new place. But I've started creating training programs that are deliverable through the internet in an on-demand basis to solve this problem. And that's really where I'm focused on going forward here.
Scott, that's a good segue. I want to ask now, if you could tell us now more about what your business is now, and what are you guys working on, and what's your role in it, and what makes you different. And we'd love to know more in detail, because you gave us the history now. So what's happening in the present day?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to kind of pick up a little bit, in the early 2000s, SEMA asked me to help write what was considered the SEMA Custom Wheel and Tire Specialist exam, was the Z5. You guys in the pro field, you had already developed a few of those because you were trying to find people that could, they had some skill sets, we wanted to identify that, but we didn't have anything for the tire and wheel market. I was asked to come into that, and I helped write that. Well, I met some people from the Tire Industry Association during that period of time, and they were about to come out with real certifications. And so when that launched, I became a certified automotive tire service instructor, and I still hold those credentials today, 20-something years later. But that program, and this is what's going to segue into what we're doing today. So the tire industry program is fundamental, and there's things in there that even people that have been working 15, 20 years have never been exposed to. They've never had any formal training. It's a foundation fundamental, but their box is typically OEM or something pretty close to it. They don't like to get outside of that realm into where you and I live, which is aftermarket, bolt-on, raised, lowered, lifted, changed, plus size, all of that type stuff. They are not ready, or it's not really where they want to live. And that's exactly where I've developed my whole career. So what we've done with the Truck Auto training is we augment the TIA program. And when doing so, we're creating content that is real world. We'll go out quite literally in the field, set up the cameras, and we'll shoot content revolving around something that is an issue or a problem that needs to be solved, or you name it. One of the biggest ones we've just released to some large national accounts that are looking to buy some products from us, from tools. We didn't invent these tools, but we are a reseller of them. And it's the 2-piece lug nuts that we see common on Ford, Dodge, even Toyota. And those things get beat up, rounded off, swollen, corroded to the point that the socket won't fit. And so there's a family here in the U.S. in Oklahoma, and they created a tool called a cam lock socket, and it squeezes on the flats of the lug nut. It can even reshape a deformed lug nut and make it to where the factory wrench will still fit back on there, or help remove that lug nut so you can put a new fresh one on. And so what we're creating is content that is exactly like that. And we're introducing tools, processes to the industry to help, everyone that's out there in the field trying to just get through each day, know how to do the job and do it better. The other thing that we're working on is creating drip content, which is 1 or 2 minute videos. And to give you an idea, ADAS is going to be on everybody's table from this point going forward. It's been around for years, but we haven't really addressed it well. Well, there's a lot of vehicles that essentially have to be told that you're going to lift them before you physically put a jack underneath them. I worked on a Lincoln Aviator not 6 months ago, and had to go in, use the driver information center there, pod right there in the dash, and actually tell it I was going to lift the vehicle before I put the airbags underneath and lifted it up, so that it didn't think that we were doing something and it tried to compensate, which means if I have a jack underneath it and this vehicle isn't put into lift mode, it may attempt to level itself or compensate in some kind of way that could essentially knock itself off the jack while we're working on the vehicle. Wow. And Tesla
just to take a wheel off.
Just to take a wheel off. That's correct. Tesla's had this for many years. I actually include this in some of our current video, and it shows how to get in the car, press the brake pedal, find the menu option of jack mode, put in jack mode, and then you actually see the car, because I have a secondary camera set up outside, and you see the car lift itself off the ground to its highest point, which then allows us to put our air jacks underneath there.
Wow. And do you think that's just a trend with technology for a lot of the newer vehicles?
You know, it just depends on what they want to do, how much technology they want to cram into these things.
Mhm.
You know, how you typically tell if the vehicle's got this type of technology is, are there different selectable driver modes to the suspension? And that's usually your first clue that something's going on, as opposed to where you can just normally peek over a tire and just see just a standard, strut sitting there with nothing else going on.
So, again, you're the expert. So, like, for instance, I drive an Acura MDX. So, and it's got like comfort and snow and sport. Are you talking that's the kind of suspension or the kind of modes that might, and maybe either now or in the future also have these kind of
That's correct.
technology?
That's correct. Now, the mode you spoke about could be directly related to just simply shift points or how tight the steering gets, those types of things, because the vehicles have been drive-by-wire for over 2 decades. We haven't had, with the exception of like trucks and various, more utilitarian type things, many of the performance vehicles, we haven't had a direct link between, us as the driver and the vehicle in years. It's all, we're making an input that's telling a sensor that's talking to another sensor to do something. And, but where you really find that is when you either can look over the tire and look at where the strut would normally be and see if there's more of a canister looking something or another. There's magnetic ride, number of different ways that they can include this technology. But that's exactly what I'm saying. And the thing is there's no resource to just go, okay, like take, for instance, I need, I'm not sure what tire I need. Let me go click, year, make, model, trim. And it'll tell us, okay, well, there's maybe a couple different tire sizes or something like that. There's nowhere to go that I'm aware of that would say, okay, if I put in these parameters, it'll tell me if this car has, this type of an active suspension. And if it does, do I even have to tell it that I need to turn it off? Because not all of them.
You would. Well, I mean, normally when a shop's looking for tires or whatever, they're putting in even the trim level, and that information you would think would be available, but it's not. You're right.
No, I've even approached ALI, Automotive Lift Institute, and they're the resource Bible for how to pick up vehicles. We keep these manuals in our mobile tire vans, and I even show them to retail tire owners, tire store owners, because I'll walk in and I'll see something being pulled into the shop, possibly something that's already been racked, and I'll ask them, it's like, so how'd you know where to pick this vehicle up? And I'm like, well, I've been picking them up like this the whole time. It hasn't fallen off yet, so it must be good. And I'm like, so where's your ALI guide? I literally did this not 8 months ago. God, had a brand new lift. I mean, this thing didn't have dirt on it. I mean, the concrete was still, it still had dirt where they drilled the holes. And I said, where's your ALI guide? He had no clue. And I quite literally walked over to the lift, and it still was banded to the post. He had no idea. Guy's been a mechanic for 20 years. He had no idea that it was just instructions that no one needs to read. It just, stays on the lift, when they installed it. So the ALI lift guide would indicate to us lift points, how to pick up vehicles, issues that needed to be dealt with, such as, back in the old days, back in the 90s, Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, they had airbag in the rear, and there was a physical switch that you would have to click either in the trunk or the rear compartment and turn that compressor off before you lifted it. And so, that's why you saw so many of those driving around with the rear bumper almost hitting the grounds, because the air system had blown out because it had been lifted most likely without shutting the system off, and then it overpressurized, blew out some seals somewhere. Now you're not talking about a simple compressor and some cheap airlines. Now you're talking about a $3,000 or $4,000, mechanical, ride control.
Yeah.
With electronics and everything else, you start getting into this Porsche type stuff and some of these really high end cars. I mean, you're talking $4,000 to $5,000 per corner if you don't do this right. Yeah, go look up a Porsche Panamera. you want to know how much a strutter costs on that? Look one up on that. That's $4,000+ per corner if you don't tell that sucker that you're going to, pick it up and deactivate that system before you lift it off the ground.
Crazy.
Wow.
Scott, what are some of the biggest challenges in your career? You sort of alluded to a few things, but I want to hear, like, maybe overall, you've been doing this a long time. What are the biggest challenges and how'd you get through some of them?
Well, as I mentioned, we, just having our industry understand the complexity of what it is that we're working on. This isn't 1988 anymore, and so unfortunately we keep treating it as though it is. And our idea of hiring doesn't include anything to do with, do you have a skill set? Is, can you show up on time? Can you just walk in the building and pass a drug test? And so the biggest challenges that I've had, and unfortunately I haven't overcome them yet, I'm trying, but it's just to simply get our industry, doesn't matter if they're a mom and pop or if they're, someone in a large corporate entity, is to understand that we need to be fostering growth in our industry by finding individuals who are excited about coming to work, want to be there, want to be challenged, and then want to grow in that career. And that's the biggest challenge that we have, is having our individuals, either, owners or managers, understand that if we haven't learned something today, in 6 months, we're going to fall behind and we're going to be we're going to be irrelevant. That's why me as an instructor, I take it very personal that, I stay hands-on. I get out, I go work on a mobile van, I go work in shops. I have a network of tons of people that constantly send me things. I got one this morning, quite literally. One of my guys out in California, Sacramento, sends me a picture, says, have you ever even seen this? Well, unfortunately, he got a armored vehicle in the shop with a 19.5, and it has this device bolted around the wheel inside the tire, so that if the tires get shot out, it'll rest on this hardened piece of whatever that was.
Wow. Uh-oh. May have lost him.
They've been beating their head on the wall for hours, and he finally just, he sends it to me and says, dude, have you ever in your life? I said, brother, I have never seen that before. But I then turned around, I started sending it out to various other people. I haven't gotten anything back apart from one guy says, I know about them, but I've never touched them. But the thing is building that network over 30+ years, having some resources, that's really what I'm bringing to the industry, is, not just trying to offer a way to teach somebody, but identify individuals that are wanting to get a career in our industry. During COVID, when I launched this program, it was the most fascinating thing. The restaurants were shut down, bars were shut down, hospitality was basically shut down. And during that first 2020, 2021, going into 2022, I taught more people from the hospitality industry who had walked into our industry than I'd ever had my whole career put together. We go to work, signs on the door. Well, somebody coughed yesterday. We got to close and scrub the place down. And they look across the street. Well, we're wrapped around the building. You can't get an oil change for 3 or 4 days at the height of COVID. I mean, we were just overwhelmed. Me personally, on my mobile van, at the peak of that summer of 2020, I was 10 days out to do any work. And I was at 15 hours a day, grinding myself to a pulp. It was so bad, my wife quit her government job and had to come to work for me to help me. But what I saw was this skill set of people coming into our industry. They had that customer experience that is unfortunately lacking in our industry quite a bit, is that how to communicate, how to work with somebody, walk them through the sale. So they had that because they made a living making someone feel good about their experience when they went to a restaurant, but they had no technical knowledge. And so what I did is I created content in short videos that we would have a 4.5 hour live session just like this in a video conference. And I'd have students all over the country. Some brand new walked in the door yesterday, some 15-year veterans. And I would merge and blend those into that classroom. And it was phenomenal to see those individuals, those younger individuals, go, wow, what's the next thing that I can learn? When's the next class? I mean, they were literally chomping at the bit. And then I had the veterans going, why didn't somebody tell me this on the first day? I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been doing it wrong.
School of Hard Knocks. So
Well,
is that are you finding, I mean, I'm finding it a little bit. It's still tough to find people, but I am finding more people now post-COVID that are willing to take a job and learn a trade versus before it was no, I'm not interested in working on cars or things such as that. Is that is that what you're finding as well?
Absolutely, Josh. And I would have led us in that direction had you not brought that up. Let me tell you what's going on here locally. So I live very near to I used to live in Baldwin County, Alabama. It's on the Alabama Gulf Coast. You know, anytime there's a hurricane, there's going to be Jim Cantori is going to be in Baldwin County because storm's going to come here. Well, the Baldwin County school system a few years ago, because we have so much industrial stuff that's come here, we build Airbuses in Mobile at Brooklyn, Austell aluminum ships. I mean, we got combat ships that they build right down here at the foot of the city. You know, that they'll tell us we'll do 60 miles an hour on open water. Who knows what the real capability, what these ships are. And so our demand for aviation, naval, shipbuilding, all that kind of stuff is just absolutely exploded. So the Baldwin County school system, we're talking like K through 12. Now, we're not talking just the college type stuff. We're talking high school. They have gone in and they have built a brand new, I mean, probably $10-15 million facility. And they're bringing in instructors teaching construction, automotive, other skill sets that are last year. I have talked to at least 2 young guys that were in high school, had no ambition of going to college, and were looking to go out and start a career in the trades. And friends of mine that are like me, you know, older veterans and have businesses that can utilize that, have partnered with that school so that the instructors know that we're looking for someone that can come on board and they know the skill sets that we're needing. I don't need a warm body to walk out there and have to explain to them, you know, which end of a screwdriver to hold. I need somebody that can walk out there. I don't expect them to know what I know, but I want them to be able to have an ambition to take the next, you know, few years of their life to learn it, because there's a lot to learn. There's a ton to learn, you know, but if you can give me someone that's excited and passionate and can see that, you know, a year from now, they can be making more money than they ever thought possible, and there is no limit, then that's where we're at. And to your point, Josh, I am seeing that in quite literally the last year. I've seen 18 and 19-year-olds working in commercial tire. They're not even able to drive the truck yet, but they're working in the store, working on some pretty big, serious equipment on some, I mean, we're talking some earth mover size tires, working, you know, $250,000, $300,000 Stellar Industries boom trucks, you know, and learning how to do things there on site where they're being trained to in the next couple of years when they can get their CDLs and can climb on the truck. Those guys will make a mint. And to really finish this point off, I met with a friend of mine at SEMA about a year or so ago. He's a mechanical engineer, works for an upfitter, one of the upfitters that I've used in the past for building these mobile vans. And he made a very prophetic point. He said, you know, the next millionaires in our country are going to be those that work with their hands. It's not going to be these college students. It's going to be the guys that goes out there and learns how to turn a wrench. I said, my God, man. I said, you know what? That's probably about as accurate as you could say. But yeah, I mean, we still have a need for college level type stuff. Don't get me wrong. But you can draw the best building. You can draw the best car, park, whatever you need, you know, design it and everything like that. But if there's not somebody out there to put it on, it's all for nothing.
Scott, I wanted to ask too about your being your own boss and why somebody would want to have a mobile tire business. Do you have a licensing program, or what is it? How does somebody get into business for themselves with you guys? I'm curious how that works.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is no real particular licensing, and I've worked with guys that came from a automotive background that just shifted into wanting to put tires and wheels on. My own business partner, he didn't have a background in the tire industry or automotive. but he was a mechanic in aviation. So he worked on Boeings and Airbuses. So the aptitude was there. I didn't have to teach him how to turn a wrench. I just needed to teach him a business model. And that's what I teach. I teach a business model that we have now dialed into just about perfection. You know, my business partner's in Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, he does a ridiculous amount of money out of just a couple of vans, you know, but it's a huge market. And when I started here in rural Alabama, I had a business coach, and he had seen me progress through the development of this, talking about what we're doing out in Phoenix. And I hadn't done it here yet in Alabama. But when I was ready to do it, I took him a business plan and I handed it to him. And he said, "This thing is absolutely phenomenal." He said, "But you got one question I need you to answer." He said, "You built this based on what you did in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the 7th largest economy in the United States. How's this going to work in rural Alabama, where we've got free roaming chickens and horses walking near the streets a mile from where we're sitting in downtown Dallas?" I said, "Mike, you know what? That was one of the most prophetic statements anybody's ever asked me, because it forced me to have to go, okay, I've got to go prove this concept that I've developed. Worked great in Phoenix, been doing it for about 3 years at that point. I've got to go see if this will work in rural Alabama." And by God, within 18 months, I bet, I was running neck and neck with my partner in Phoenix, Arizona, in regards to revenue. So, and I mean, now we're talking opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, quite literally, you know, you go 2 miles outside of downtown where I lived, and I mean, quite literally, there were chickens just free roaming. So I had a lot more territory I had to cover to get what I needed. But the fact was, is I was able to apply that same business model to our area and accomplish the same goal. And
so is what percentage of it is like B2B, where you're calling on maybe a dealership, helping them out, or maybe another store, or is it all B2C?
It's almost all B2C, almost
Okay.
every of it. Now, there is a strategy to the types of businesses that we go after, the industries that we go after, because there's just, you know, your service industries are going to be at the top of that list. I mean, they're running, you know, they don't make a living unless they go somewhere to get to the work, you know, landscape, pest control, construction, you know, whatever it is. So there's that aspect. There is a level of high performance vehicles, the restyle market, such as what you guys work with. You know, I do some of that. But the B2B, honestly, I get referrals from some of the local automotive repair and tire shops and some of the auto dealerships, because they don't have the tools or the personnel that can tackle some of these things.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why we're partnering with a number of people that can get our training programs into these dealerships, whether it's an automotive dealership or maybe like an independent tire group of some type, or an organization that we're now partnering with a lot of these organizations and providing our training solution as a value add. And that's the next big thing that we're doing, is we're basically leveraging everybody else to promote the business to their members and giving those members, you know, discounts by clicking on specific links that only they have access to. And that's where we're going.
That's awesome.
But talking about the mobile side, just very quickly, and I'll cut off on that. So we've sourced a number of specific tools that are extremely valuable, not only for us in the mobile side of it, but they work just as well in the retail store. But more importantly, what we're doing is we're bringing training aspects to those that are getting in mobile, because a lot of them, like I said, not everybody came from an automotive background. You know, I've taught people that sold satellite dishes, and then they got into this business, and he's one of my most successful guys. He's in Missouri. So, but what we bring, the most important thing is it's not about the van. There is a specific layout that makes it extremely efficient and able to produce a lot of money. But the business model and the business development that we add to that and teach people how to go out and build this business, that's fundamentally what the most important part of it is.
Yeah. You give them the tools, but you give them the playbook as well.
That's exactly right. And so we don't franchise, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that, because there are some franchises that are out there, and that can be a different conversation, but I do not franchise. I'm paid upfront for training and business consulting, and then there's 90-day statement of work that they can bring me. They can keep me on as a fractional COO as long as they need me. And when they're comfortable and they've got things in place and they don't need me any longer, you know what? They can cut the cord and, call me whenever they run into something odd, like some armored vehicle tire that I've never even seen before, right?
But they'll always have Scott the Wheelman on speed dial. So
pretty much the way it goes. Yes.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for everything you do for our industry and helping. And I mean, your knowledge is just, that's the key, is how do we get that stuff from, Scott the Wheelman's head out into the thing. So, I mean, Jesse has always one last question to you, but this is going to be very important. So as you answer him, talk slowly so that people listening can write this stuff down.
Where can people follow you or learn more about what you're doing? Which websites do you want to share? Please help us to learn more. Where do people go?
So it's real easy. So the first one is track, TRACK, autotraining.com. And that points you to the website where we have our initiative called Rebuilding the Automotive Workforce in 4 stages, going from video on demand to live virtual instruction to hands-on certification. And for those interested in a mobile, whether they want to do it as that's the only thing, or if they want to add it to their brick and mortar, that is 2U mobilesolutions.com. That's the number 2, letter U, mobile, MOBILE, solutions with an S.com.
Now, are you only doing that because you're in Mobile, Alabama, or because it's mobile on the road?
Mobile on the road, but fortunately, there's not a whole lot of mobiles anywhere else, because for SEO purposes, it's a nightmare because I
believe it. I've got a mobile route in Mobile.
Yeah, so it looks like every single person in Mobile is mobile. So my mobile doesn't stick out. I have to be very creative in keywords.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. One last question before we let you go, because I always ask this to tire guys. I see all these tire guys, and you're one of the smartest tire guys. In the future, can we ever just get a tire that's actually mass produced without air? Can we do it? I mean, I've seen them out there, but can we do it, or is it just am I barking up the wrong tree?
For a industrial application such as the wheel that you've probably seen, I mean, that thing came out 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
About it being new, but for industrial applications, I don't know why they don't build it for off-road. Why do we need pneumatic tires to go crawling over rocks?
Thank you.
It makes the most sense for things of this nature. Of course, you see them on the John Deere Gator lawnmowers.
Yep.
The problem is have you priced a lawnmower wheel?
No, I don't cut my own grass. I have a kid for that. But I do think that it could be profitable for some tire companies. But I also understand, listen, the last thing what they want to do is create something that's going to last forever too.
Well, it's too expensive, and I think it eliminates the individualization, which is exactly what we all make a living on, is the restock. And if you see the airless tires, they have to have an engineered hub. And I've never seen anything that tells me that can be changed in any kind of way, shape, or form that would let somebody individualize their vehicle. And so as long as as long as we all want our stuff to look like our own, I don't think you and I are having any issues with having a living for the foreseeable future.
Fair enough.
Industrial.
I consider it settled, Jesse. I consider the point settled. I'm not asking any more people. I finally asked Scott the Wheelman, and so now it's a dead issue, Jesse. I'll never ask again.
And there you have it, another high-octane episode of the Ride and Style podcast, revved up and ready to go. Your hosts, Jesse Stoddard and Josh Poulson, shifted your automotive game into overdrive. If you're hungry for more insights, trends, and game-changing interviews from the automotive restyling universe, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a glowing review. We'd also love for you to share this podcast with your gearheads, installers, and auto lovers network. Because remember, knowledge is power, but shared knowledge turbocharges the whole industry. For more expert resources to supercharge your business, cruise on over to autostylemarketing.com, your one-stop shop for everything automotive marketing. Until next time, keep those wheels spinning and your passion ignited. Thank you for riding in style with us. See you on the next lap.